so now we come to the fun part that everybody really enjoys, and I can see we have lots of questions piling up already in the Q&A.
So the emulsifiers help to stabilize the air bubbles, which then prevents them from collapsing, disperses the fats in the water phase better, and overall, that stabilization of the air bubbles helps to avoid the tunneling from occurring.
I would like to add to that as well, because air cells and gas bubbles are pretty much unstable, and they are always going to find the easiest path to escape. So if you don't give them a viscous medium to settle in or to play around in, they're just going to go up. So that's how I explain tunneling to a lot of people, which pretty much indicates that your number one problem is instability within your system. And you can actually improve that through increasing the viscosity. But unfortunately, there's only so much gums and so much pre-gel starches that you can use. So this is why emulsifiers is so important. Emulsifiers are used as such a small little percentage that is so effective across the board. So whenever you see tunneling in the crumb of the cake, it is a number one for sure instability in the system. So
I'll add my 2 cents in that, further to what Mike has said, is that in emulsifying the fat properly, because if there are fat lumps that remain behind that aren't fully emulsified into the system, they then melt and they help the air bore that tunnel. And so the larger the tunnels are, those are usually a combination of fat and air. When you see, like, especially when you cut the top of a cake off, not just the cross section, and you see these, it looks like a bunch of worms have dug their way through the cake, right? And that's also poor emulsification.
Yes. So when you're selecting your emulsifier, it really comes back to what are you trying to emulsify, right? And typically what we have found that using a combination of a high HLB emulsifier, which helps to get the fat or the oil into the water phase, along with a low HLB emulsifier, which typically helps to get water to mix better with the oil phase, you get a combination that's better than if you use just a single emulsifier.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're looking at what are some high HLB emulsifiers, well, those can be your ethoxylated glycerols. They can be polysorbates, polyglycerol esters. Anything that has a high polarity to it typically is considered a high HLB emulsifier. Your low HLB emulsifiers, those could be glycerol esters, sorbitan esters. Those are commonly used in food products.
Sometimes a way of looking at it almost in a simple terms is that the lower HLB emulsifiers are more of a dispersant in the emulsification, and the higher HLBs also aid with aeration at the same time as well.
So we did not specifically design it for those to be used in those recipes, but there's no reason to believe that they wouldn't be successful in there. It really comes down to identifying what the appropriate level of dosing of the Simply Cake would be in those formulations to get the great crumb, but not over emulsifying. And so it would require some efforts, some testing to really get to the right level. And then some of the other things that we've learned that aren't necessarily just limited to gluten-free and vegan is that we have found that using Simply Cake does allow you to reduce some of the fat, oil content, and shortening in the cakes. And it's also possible to reduce the amount of egg that is used in the batter as well.
I just wanted to point out that Simply Cake is gluten-free. I mean, you don't use wheat-based product, and you
That's
don't use
correct.
malt-based product, right?
That
Okay.
is correct. Yes, thank you for that clarification, Lynn.
Okay.
Perfect.
That's a great question. You know, when we started on our efforts to develop Simply Cake, our goal was to get somewhere, if you remember the pictures that Laura showed, somewhere between no emulsifier and what the industry standard cake mate was. And so that was our goal. And you know, using what we knew about cake mate, that pointed us in some direction in terms of selecting the right ratios and balance of emulsifiers to use. But you know, we wanted to make sure we didn't include any artificial preservatives, ethoxylated monoglycerides in there, or polysorbates. So that meant we had to make some changes. You know, as we were going through this, we did end up, to our surprise, getting an improved cake batter. You know, our crumb structure was comparable. The volume of the cake was actually larger than it was for using the standard traditional cake mate. And what does that mean to the baker? Well, I mean, it means that to get the same size cake, you could use less batter. If you use less batter to get the same size cake, you also are going to end up reducing your caloric content as well.
And in the end, you'll get more cakes per batch too. So
Right.
more money goes in the till.
Exactly.
I say as much as you can until you can't tolerate it anymore. But really, I've seen cinnamon cakes not mold at all. The less you go, you know, the less effect it has, you know. So develop the cakes around the cinnamon flavor. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah.
I have seen raisin cinnamon cakes not mold at all. So if you want natural, that's as natural as you can get, but you also get the flavor.
Yeah, raisins can act as a natural mold inhibitor as well. Yeah.
Correct. It's raisin muffins.
Mm-hmm.
Right, raisin muffins. Yummy.
That's a complicated question because the chocolate is made up of essentially the cacao solids, as well as cocoa butter, as well as sugar, and it already has a small amount of lecithin added to it to stabilize this whole thing. So it's a very different system. Plus the you know, the melt point and solidity point of the cocoa butter is like it's not agreeable to mixing cakes really that well. Cocoa powder itself is primarily a fibrous powder that has a fat content of anywhere from 11 to 24%, depending on which grade you're using, right? So you're getting fat interference, but you're also getting that it absorbs a lot of water. Like cacao powder can absorb up to 4 times its weight in water before it stops thickening at that point. So you kind of have to balance all of those things together, right? So in the end, it becomes that you are you're really emulsifying water, and the cacao is just a carrier within all of it and things. You know,
I
Lin?
have not experienced cacao powder as impeding the action of emulsifiers as much as it affects the leavening system. So that is where I feel cocoa powder has the most effect as the leavening system based on alkalized cocoa. So I don't think it does change anything.
Yeah, and the Mike, the cake mate and Simply Cake those are high ratio cake emulsifier systems, correct?
Yes.
Yes, they're not egg foam sponge cake mixtures. Yeah. Those types of emulsifiers, there are challenges because, of course, the fat from the cocoa powder would interfere with the emulsification system. But otherwise, it's just part of the whole high ratio cake system. And as Lin pointed out, because of the alkalinity or acidity of the cocoa, depending on whether it's natural or alkalized, that affects the leavening much more.
I'll start with what's not in Simply Cake. We didn't put any artificial preservatives in there. No ethoxylated species, so no ethoxylated monoglycerides or polysorbates. It contains water. It is a hydrated emulsifier. It has sorbitan monostearate. It has mono and diglycerides. It has polyglycerol esters, propylene glycol, lecithin, and citric acid. Pantry-friendly cakes typically don't necessarily have emulsifiers in them that are going to help to retain moisture and then delay the staling process. In terms of, preservatives, I think Lin covered that really well. She's more of an expert on that than me, but natural preservatives are certainly going to help to extend the shelf life of a cake.
I don't think you can make a shelf-stable cake out of your pantry. I think that's kind of like pipe dream. I don't know. I mean, if you open up your pantry and you to make a cake, I think you'd be lucky if that cake could last for more than 2 days, in the fridge, right? So firstly, I think it's an impossibility to expect a pantry to provide a shelf-stable cake. Next thing is, if you take a few steps many decades ago, if you look at cake and how it's been done, it's all eggs, it's all fat, and there were no emulsifiers because there was so much eggs in the system. So if you really want a pantry friendly label, you are going to be expecting a really expensive cake formula. So unless you're willing to give in on that and to formulating with all eggs, you're talking about probably 6 to 8 eggs per cake. That's the kind of formulas that was created, in the 40s, 50s, right? So this is why emulsifiers came into play, because emulsifiers cut the cost of eggs in the formula. So unless you're willing to put in all that money into natural ingredients like more eggs, then it's quite impossible to produce a cost-effective shelf-stable cake product. So I say do all your trial and errors with as much eggs as you can afford, that your customers will pay for, and then look towards supporting ingredients like emulsifiers, hydrocolloids, pre-gel starches, It really depends, like what Laura said, what are you looking for in your cleaning up of your label? Because at the end of the day, if your customer is okay with you using chlorinated flour, they're okay with you using SALP, they're okay with you using emulsifiers that were presented here.
Yep.
So it really depends on your customers.
Yeah, there's as a reminder again, there's no legal definition of clean label. It is defined by consumer perception and the specialty retailers who have their own, would have become known as no-no lists. And that is basically all there is there. And, to Lin's point on eggs, eggs are also a commodity that have become very unstable in price, and they're on the high side much more often than they ever are on the low side. And avian flu is not something that will ever completely go away. It's just a matter of how well the farmers can manage it at this point. And we still hear, every year, it's not that no hens are being destroyed, it's how many. And it's always difficult. Anything, Mike and Laura, that you think we should bring up out there for people?
No, I think we covered, most of the topics that are of interest to folks. As you said, there's no legal definition for clean label, and that poses a huge challenge for all of us trying to serve that segment of the market.
No, it's great to know you guys have solutions available for this, and encourage everyone who, if you are working on challenges with clean label, talk to Vantage Foods. They have the support to provide you with in supporting the emulsification system that will reach your goals, and other things as well, release agents, all kinds of other solutions that they have as well. Fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on today. It's been really great, very, very informative. Thank you, Lin, as well, for always a great presentation. And if there are no other questions, then we're giving back a few minutes of your day today, I guess. And we will see you in the next seminar next month, and in our forums at the Baking Industry Professionals Group on LinkedIn and Facebook, and join us on the podcast for Baked in Science. Take care, everyone.